They came out of nowhere, two Iranian Shahed bombers, low and silent, over the Persian Gulf, cutting through the dawn like predators cloaked in mist. On Allied radar, their signatures pulsed red. Unknown, unresponsive, deliberate. Within minutes, the United States Air Force F-35 Lightning IIs roared into the sky from Udeid Air Base, their stealth profiles hunting through the darkness. Across the water, a British destroyer and Bahraini radar command tracked every movement as tension built to a razor's edge. 3 minutes, that's all it took for calm skies to erupt into chaos. Missiles locked, warnings ignored, and then fire over the Gulf. 2 bombers obliterated, no survivors. But what really happened in those 3 minutes? Was it self-defense or a spark that nearly lit the region aflame? Stay till the very end, because once you see the full scope of this aerial confrontation, you'll understand why this 3-minute battle changed everything. Before the first light touched the Persian Gulf, tension already shimmered above the water like heat over steel. The air was thick with humidity and anticipation. Inside the forward radar command on Jazirat al-Dura, monitors glowed an eerie blue, tracking the endless movements of commercial routes, cargo convoys, and unidentified echoes. For weeks, intelligence briefs had warned of Iranian aircraft rehearsing long-range strike runs near the maritime borders of Bahrain and Qatar. But on this particular morning, there was something different, an unspoken awareness that the warnings were about to materialize. Colonel Marcus D. Halpern, commanding officer of the 13th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron, stood over the operations table at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. His uniform sleeves were rolled to the elbows, eyes fixed on a live data feed from Horizon Line 7, a thin boundary monitored jointly by U.S. and Allied radar arrays. "It's not an exercise," murmured one analyst. 2 radar blips had appeared west of the line, slow, deliberate, and flying at altitudes typical of heavy bombers. The signatures didn't match civilian traffic. They matched something else Shahed-class strategic bombers and aircraft Iran had publicly denied using for offensive missions since 2023. At 0327 local time, the British destroyer HMS Vigilant, positioned north of Bahrain, picked up the same contacts. Its Combat Information Center confirmed the radar tracks using its Samson multi-function array, fusing data through Link 16 directly into the American network. Within seconds, both feeds aligned. The tracks were real. The bombers were holding course toward Bahrain's industrial coast. Across the Gulf in the Bushehr Air Wing, Brigadier General Reza Mahdavi observed the same airspace from a different lens. To his pilots, the mission was a show of strength, a carefully measured flight meant to remind coalition patrols of Iran's regional reach. His orders were simple: maintain formation, stay low, and transmit no active radar. To Mahdavi, it was about signaling deterrence, not triggering war. Yet he knew that a single miscalculation could turn signal into spark. The U.S. Combined Air Operations Center classified the developing situation under Operation Ridgepoint, a standing defensive protocol for unauthorized incursions. Colonel Halpern's decision tree was clear: verify, warn, intercept. But verification would take minutes, and those minutes were bleeding away. He had seen this pattern before: slow, heavy aircraft closing distance under radio silence, sometimes turning away at the last moment, sometimes not. The Gulf was a chessboard where every square was political. On Bahrain's western shoreline, the first fishermen were already pushing boats into the water. They looked up occasionally at the faint contrails above the dawn clouds, unaware that 2 of the most advanced aircraft on the planet were about to cross paths with bombers built for intimidation and payload. The world beneath them was ordinary, but the sky was on edge. By 0332, the radar operators reported a coded phrase that sealed the next step. Echoes confirmed hostile trajectory. Colonel Halpern inhaled, steady and silent. The calm before the storm had ended. The alert tone in the operations room was clinical, a thin, repeating note that cut through the low hum of cooling systems and tired voices. Analysts at Jazirat al-Dura cross-checked transponder silence against infrared contacts and acoustic signatures logged overnight. The patterns matched a doctrine the coalition had studied for months: low-altitude ingress along Tandis flight path, minimal emissions, and a deliberate approach designed to complicate or got back a radar discrimination. For the United States Air Force, that approach translated into a narrowing window to act. For the Islamic Republic of Iran, it was an instrument of coercive signaling meant to test responses without an overt strike. Colonel Marcus D. Halpern rotated a pen between his fingers and read the concatenated feeds again. He listened to the smooth, professional cadence of the British liaison who spoke from HMS Vigilant about vector corrections and range estimations. The British destroyer had shared its Samson hits over Link 16, augmenting local Bahraini radar. The fused tracks produced a clearer picture, two heavy, slow-moving signatures holding formation roughly 40 nautical miles west of Horizon Line 7, converging towards Sector Echo 29. Colonel Marcus D. Halpern barked one order that had been rehearsed 1,000 times in paper exercises: notify Bahrain. Prepare interceptor vectors. The words were short because time was short. In the Bushehr Air Wing Command tent, Brigadier General Reza Mahdavi watched his pilot's telemetry with similar focus, but a different emotional cadence. For him, the maneuver was diplomatic muscle, an assertion of reach in a region where symbolism often outweighed ordnance. He had briefed air crews that the mission's intent was political pressure, and that the aircraft must avoid any escalation that would justify a kinetic response. The pilots trained in operational ambiguity respected the order, but also knew how quickly an ambiguous line could become a hard one. The Islamic Republic of Iran's strategic calculus included plausible deniability, yet plausible deniability can be fragile when met with 21st century sensor webs. Back at Udeid Air Base, mission planners overlaid satellite imagery with maritime traffic lanes and civilian air corridors. They plotted probable turn points, fuel states, and potential abort profiles. The analysts annotated Operation Ridgepoint checklists, rules of engagement confirmations, positive identification thresholds, and the sequence of escalation for non-compliance. Every checkbox carried legal, political, and human weight. The United States Air Force could engage under narrow conditions, but engagement would ripple outward, a diplomatic pebble, creating waves across capitals in Washington, Manama, and Tehran. On the shore near Bahrain's oil terminal's port, workers switched on floodlights and watched as the horizon gave up two small, dark silhouettes that did not belong to commercial aviation. Their faces, lined from years of dawn shifts, registered unease. The human element was the same on both sides of the engagement pilots, who were also father sailors, who were also sons commanders, whose decisions carried other people's lives. Colonel Marcus D. Halpern traced those human threads in his head as he authorized pre-intercept warnings. He thought not of doctrine, but of people and of responsibility. The United States Air Force and the Islamic Republic of Iran were entangled in a ritual of brinkmanship, each step measured against a backdrop of national honor and survival. As the first warning transmissions were cued and coded messages began to ripple through Allied nets, the slow, deliberate morning became an active theater. The fishermen rowed lower into their boats, instinct nudging them away from the anticipated locus of collision. Above them, the sky, vast and impersonal, was tightening into a corridor of consequence where technology command and human judgment would soon collide. The calm that had draped the Persian Gulf was giving way to a thin, hard edge of action. At 03:34 local time, the calm rhythm of the Gulf's night air broke with the sharp rise of alert levels across Allied radar networks. The phrase "track confirmed, Class B potential hostile" blinked on screens at Jazirat al-Dura. The Royal Bahraini Air Force technicians leaned closer to the glowing grid as new radar pings outlined the inbound vectors, two aircraft flying below 15,000 feet, maintaining a steady course directly toward Bahrain's western coast. The low signature suggested radar suppression, but the altitude, the formation, and the velocity aligned precisely with the known performance envelope of the Shahed-class strategic bomber, an Iranian twin-engine aircraft designed for long-endurance strike missions. Far north, the HMS Vigilant's command deck was awash in low red light. Commander Olivia Trent, the ship's executive officer, monitored the rotating sweep of to the Samson radar array. Its data transmitted over Link 16 fused with Bahraini and American inputs, forming a unified digital battlespace. The combined imagery painted a pattern that no operator could misinterpret: two bombers operating without transponders, using a flight path historically reserved for cargo aircraft, but at speeds inconsistent with civilian tonnage. Commander Trent muttered, "They know we're watching. They want to see how far we'll wait." At Udeid Air Base, Colonel Marcus D. Halpern received confirmation through the Combined Air Operations Center (CAOC. A burst of encrypted telemetry scrolled across the screen bearing altitude, estimated fuel range, and possible intent markers. The intelligence desk cross-referenced the data with recent Iranian airfield activity at Bushehr and Chabahar. Maintenance records indicated both Shahed units had undergone avionics upgrades, potentially improving radar-absorbent coatings and electronic warfare suites. That upgrade made early identification harder, but also proved that this was no accident. "Do we have positive ID?" asked Halpern. His operations officer, Major Leclerc, shook his head. "Infrared trace matches, but we'll need visual or transponder spoof to confirm hostile intent." The colonel nodded. "Then we're out of time. Get me Bahrain Air Command. We'll execute Ridgepoint Phase 2. While the Americans coordinated the Royal Bahraini Air Force, prepared ground-based radar locks and electronic countermeasure arrays. The Gulf airspace, normally dotted with passenger routes, began to empty as civil air controllers quietly redirected traffic eastward. To the public, it looked like precaution. To the men in the operations rooms, it was silent proof that something was unfolding, something that could either be contained or ignite. In Bushehr, Brigadier General Reza Mahdavi listened to the clipped reports from his bomber crews. The Iranian pilots maintained radio silence, except for brief coded bursts acknowledging position. He was told that one aircraft call sign Falcon 1 had minor engine vibration but continued its mission. Mahdavi exhaled through his nose, feeling the weight of each minute. His orders to them had been precise: no weapons systems activation, no radar emission. To the world, the aircraft were unarmed reconnaissance assets. To Mahdavi himself, they were instruments of pressure leverage through proximity. But in the skies, technology had erased much of ambiguity. American AWACS satellites above Horizon Line 7 transmitted near-live infrared sweeps. The faint heat signatures confirmed weapon bays, partially open, an act no training flight would risk. That visual was enough. At 0338, Colonel Halpern received the official classification hostile configuration confirmed. He paused for one heartbeat, eyes fixed on the digital map. The two red icons crept closer to Bahrain's economic exclusion zone. Around him, the room had quieted, not out of confusion, but out of collective comprehension. They all knew what came next. The colonel turned to his communications officer. "Transmit scramble order. F-35 flight ready." Within 90 seconds, the siren at Udeid Air Base wailed across the tarmac. Ground crews sprinted to secure fuel lines, loaders, cleared maintenance scaffolds, and pilots strapped into flight suits. The United States Air Force was about to lift two of its most advanced aircraft into a night sky already trembling with geopolitical consequence. And somewhere far above, between the stillness of sea and the emptiness of dawn, the invisible distance between peace and confrontation began to collapse. Colonel Marcus D. Halpern authorized the scramble with a voice that carried the weight of command and the clarity of rehearsed resolve. The order moved through the chain of command and into the hands of two pilots assigned to the 13th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron, men trained to translate seconds into decisive action. At Udeid Air Base, technicians sealed canopies, engines spooled, and the silhouette of two F-35A Lightning IIs cut against the pre-dawn horizon as they taxied for takeoff. The United States Air Force jets carried more than ordnance. They carried rules of engagement, legal thresholds, and the political expectations of an allied coalition. The pilots ran through briefings on the fly. Their mission: intercept and identify, warn and deter, and only if necessary, engage to protect Bahraini territorial integrity. The United States Air Force pilots verified Link 16 connectivity with the British destroyer HMS Vigilant and the Royal Bahraini Air Force radar net, ensuring a fused battlespace picture. The F-35s distributed sensors fed back night vision feeds, radar overlays, and infrared tracks into the pilots' helmets, giving them a synthetic picture of the two bogies approaching along Tandis flight path. Colonel Marcus D. Halpern listened to the confirmatory chatter, vectors aligned, weapon systems set to advisory. He did not relax. As the two F-35A Lightning IIs climbed towards Sector Echo 29, the pilots calibrated their approach to minimize escalation. Stealth profiles and passive tracking were prioritized. Emissions control remained active to avoid turning the intercept into a radar duel. The United States Air Force doctrine emphasized measured presence, yet the pilots had clear latitude to act if the Iranian bomber configuration indicated imminent strike. Their aircraft used the distributed aperture system to search the darkened sea for heat signatures, cross-referencing those with radar cues from HMS Vigilant and Bahraini coastal stations on Jazirat al-Dura. Back in Bushehr, Brigadier General Reza Mahdavi received updates that the interceptors were airborne. He had authorized a low observability approach under strict orders: maintain formation, avoid active radar, do not engage. The Iranian crews reported minor discrepancies in a single aircraft's avionics, but pressed on, claiming the mission remained political and not kinetic. The Islamic Republic of Iran command posture relied on ambiguity as leverage. Yet ambiguity can collapse under the hard light of coalition sensor fusion. As the F-35 a Lightning IIs closed the distance to the inbound bombers, coordination tightened between the United States Air Force, the Royal Bahraini Air Force, and British maritime radar. Pilots rehearsed escalation ladders in their heads and recited legal checkpoints aloud. Every instrument readout, every fused contact, and every voice transmission contracted into a narrow corridor where judgment would decide whether the episode ended in a warning or in fire. The sky over the Persian Gulf had become a counting room, where seconds were currency and restraint was a measured expenditure. One and Razor 2 slipped through the humid night like shadows cutting the thin air. Their radar cross-sections were near zero, their infrared profiles cooled by regulated exhaust dispersal. Inside their cockpits, the pilots' visors glowed with synchronized feeds from satellites Bahraini coastal radar and the British destroyer HMS Vigilant. Ahead, the Shahed bombers maintained a slow, deliberate pace at 13,000 feet. They had crossed into the air defense identification zone of Bahrain without transponders or reply codes. Colonel Marcus D. Halpern, monitoring from the Combined Air Operations Center, received the last confirmation before engagement protocol: visual contact within 60 seconds. Through the F-35's electro-optical targeting system, the bombers appeared as pale forms against the dull reflection of the sea below. The pilots' voices were steady, professional, almost mechanical. Razor 1, tally 2 contacts. Iranian Shahed-class formation steady. No response to hails. Onboard HMS Vigilant commander Olivia Trent watched the engagement unfold through synchronized radar overlays. Her operators reported a brief electromagnetic surge emanating from one of the bombers, a pulse consistent with radar jamming or missile targeting preparation. "They just lit something," she said, eyes narrowing. "It's enough to trigger defensive protocol." The data jumped instantly through Link 16, flashing across Colonel Halpern's console. His response was immediate: Razor flight. You are cleared for deterrent maneuver lock without fire. The F-35 pilots executed a perfect bracket. Razor 1 accelerated past the bomber's right wing, while Razor 2 dropped to a lower altitude and rose again to flank from below. The Shahed stayed silent, their engines steady, but one aircraft call sign, Falcon 1, began a gradual climb. That maneuver violated the established intercept corridor, implying preparation for evasion or aggression. The tension in the radio channel tightened to a fine thread. Falcon 1 changing altitude, no IFF. Possible targeting behavior, reported Razor 2. Halpern exhaled. Maintain lock. Warn twice, then engage if escalation persists. First warning burst transmitted across secure frequencies ignored. The second went unanswered. Then the Iranian aircraft's nose tilted 2 degrees higher, and infrared sensors captured a brightening heat bloom under its fuselage bay. The visual signature matched a weapon system warming cycle. Colonel Halpern's voice dropped an octave calm, but absolute. Weapons free. Execute Ridgepoint. The F-35 pilots responded without flourish. 2 AIM-120D missiles detached from Razor 1 and Razor 2 almost simultaneously. Their contrails were invisible in the night air, their guidance systems tracking pure vector heat. Within seconds, the first missile struck Falcon 1's port engine. A bright sphere of orange ruptured over the Gulf, followed moments later by the second explosion that consumed the second bomber attempting to turn west. Radar screens showed twin icons blinking, then vanishing. Silence followed a silence thick and unnatural, as though the sea itself held its breath. The dogfight had lasted exactly 3 minutes. The Gulf, once filled with tension and electronic chatter, fell back into its steady rhythm of waves and wind. For Colonel Halpern and his command confirmation came via radar telemetry, and infrared trace 2 contacts destroyed 0 friendly loss. In Bushehr, Brigadier General Reza Mahdavi stared at the fading icons on his own display, realizing that a mission intended for psychological pressure had become a tragedy of signal misinterpretation. In that instant, the Persian Gulf had again proven itself the most fragile mirror reflecting power fear, and the thin margin separating deterrence from destruction. By 0346, the radar feed from HMS Vigilance stabilized into a clean sweep of the southern Gulf corridor. 2 red icons that had haunted operators for 20 minutes were now gone, erased into digital silence. Commander Olivia Trent's voice came through the secure channel, steady but edged with disbelief. Confirmed radar loss of both Iranian bombers. No parachutes, no beacons. On Jazirat al-Dura, Bahraini radar officers cross-verified the readings. The skies over Sector Echo 29 were once again empty, except for the faint echo of debris tumbling toward the sea. Colonel Marcus D. Halpern leaned forward over the command table as the data crystallized. Visual confirmation, he asked. The response came seconds later. Thermal plume collapse confirmed at 0344. No surviving signatures. The colonel closed his eyes for a brief instant, knowing that operational success always carried the taste of loss. 2 aircraft down meant 2 human lives extinguished regardless of uniform or flag. But duty required detachment. Mark coordinates, deploy maritime patrol for debris containment, he ordered. The Royal Bahraini Air Force launched a pair of CN-235 patrol planes from Udeid Air Base to survey the projected impact site. The Gulf below shimmered in broken lines of light as dawn began to bleed into the horizon. Small patches of burning fuel floated on the water, forming temporary constellations on the dark sea. The wreckage of one Iranian Shahed-class bomber had broken into multiple fragments. The other had impacted almost intact, sinking within seconds. The patrol crews dropped infrared buoys to assist recovery vessels in locating debris before currents pulled it toward shipping lanes. Far from the scene on the British destroyer HMS Vigilant, the bridge crew monitored sonar returns as pieces of fuselage sank through layers of warm and cold water. One operator muttered softly, "They're gone." Commander Trent simply nodded. "Log it and maintain readiness." To her, there was no celebration, only procedure. Every intercept, even when justified, carried diplomatic echoes that would ripple through ministries and newsrooms before the next tide. In Bushehr, the situation room of Brigadier General Reza Mahdavi descended into strained quiet. The liaison officers whispered, afraid to interpret what the radar had already made clear. Mahdavi's expression did not change as the report arrived. Falcon 1 and 2 lost contact. He removed his headset, his fingers trembling slightly. He knew what the official statement would say: technical failure during maritime patrol. Yet the truth unspoken was carved in the numbers blinking on his screen. He turned to his deputy and murmured, "2 pilots gone for nothing but message theater." At Udeid Air Base, Colonel Halpern reviewed the full radar playback. Each frame of the intercept was analyzed for protocol adherence. The United States Air Force investigation officer confirmed all engagement criteria had been met. Hostile configuration, no transponder identification escalation through warning phases. There would be no reprimand. Still, Halpern knew paperwork would not shield the pilots from the burden of what they had done. Razor 1, Razor 2 returned to base, he said softly into the mic. The F-35. A Lightning II was banked eastward, flying into the pale light of early dawn. Beneath them, the Persian Gulf looked tranquil, betraying no sign of the violence that had unfolded moments before. In the cockpit, one pilot spoke quietly into the recorder. Targets neutralized. Area clear. God forgive us all. The transmission was logged and archived, another line in a long ledger of aerial engagements that history would later summarize in a single sentence. As the jets disappeared into the softening sky, the calm returned. Bahrain's coastline shimmered in morning haze. Fishermen resumed casting nets, and news of the shoot-down began its journey through encrypted channels toward embassies and defense ministries. In 3 minutes of combat, a crisis had been contained, but also renewed. The Gulf had witnessed yet another collision between deterrence and pride, written not in speeches but in contrails and debris. By sunrise, the Persian Gulf looked deceptively peaceful, its surface calm, its silence indifferent. Yet beneath that stillness lay the echoes of a confrontation that had nearly rewritten the fragile balance of the region. Reports began circulating through diplomatic channels the United States Air Force had downed 2 Iranian Shahed-class bombers after multiple ignored warnings near Bahraini airspace. Official statements emphasized restraint precision and adherence to international law. But behind closed doors, the tone was heavier. Every command room from Washington to Manama to Tehran understood how narrowly escalation had been avoided. Colonel Marcus D. Halpern sat alone in his office, his flight jacket draped over the chair. The adrenaline had faded, leaving only the residue of contemplation. He replayed the engagement feed once more, each second crisp, each missile's arc inevitable. Success in tactical terms? Yes. But victory felt hollow. He thought of the 2 Iranian pilots, men he would never meet, who had likely carried out their orders with the same sense of duty that guided his own. They flew into history, not hostility, he murmured. His adjutant standing nearby said nothing. There was nothing to add. On the opposite shore, Brigadier General Reza Mahdavi drafted a statement for his superiors. It would frame the loss as a technical malfunction during reconnaissance, a narrative meant to preserve dignity and postpone retaliation. But the general's eyes betrayed grief. He knew those pilots had trained one of them years ago. We told them to fly low and stay silent, he whispered. And silence was what we got. In Bahrain, recovery teams collected fragments of fuselage and charred instruments. Local fishermen who had watched the lights fall hours earlier helped mark coordinates for debris retrieval. They did not know the politics, only that 2 aircraft had fallen and that men had perished. Their small gestures, pulling a twisted panel from the water, offering prayers under their breath, formed the quiet human punctuation to a night of steel and command. As the world's news outlets began their cycle of speculation and analysis, the skies over the Gulf regained their neutrality. For Colonel Halpern, the lesson was as enduring as the sunrise itself, that power, when exercised even within rules, always extracts a moral toll. He closed the mission log and looked toward the eastern horizon. If you value clear cinematic battlefield analysis, told through human eyes, and disciplined detail, subscribe for more perspectives from the world's tense frontiers where technology meets conscience, and peace is always one decision away.